this time, watching this all go down, both the resentencing, the death penalty that they gave him off the table now, and the fact that he could be looking at a new trial. And I asked them, do you still feel that the right person is behind bars? They said yes. When I spoke to juror number one about the motive in this, here's what he had to say.
I personally believe that when
Hello, and welcome to Crime Time with the Easy E. Yes, the King, where we turn criminals into the roaches that they are, and then stomp on them, or make them disappear. Shit. Okay, now, awkward pause, as I try to recover and pretend that didn't happen. Anywho, in 2002, Modesto, California was rocked by the disappearance of a young pregnant woman named Laci Peterson. What started as a missing persons case quickly turned into a national sensation when suspicion fell on Laci's husband, Scott Peterson. This is the story of Laci Peterson and the shocking murder that stunned a nation. Laci Denise Peterson was born on May 4, 1975, in Modesto, California. She was the only daughter of Sharon and Dennis Rocha, and had a half-brother named Brent. Laci grew up in Modesto and attended California Polytechnic State University, where she earned a degree in ornamental horticulture. After college, Laci worked as a substitute teacher and at a restaurant called Pacific Cafe, where she met her future husband, Scott Peterson. Scott Lee Peterson was born on October 24, 1972, in San Diego, California. He was the youngest of 3 siblings and grew up in a middle-class family. After high school, Scott attended Arizona State University, where he studied agricultural business. He later moved to California and started a fertilizer business called Trade Corp. In 1997, Scott met Laci at the Pacific Cafe, and the two began dating. Laci and Scott were married on August 9, 1997, in a ceremony in San Luis Obispo, California. They later moved to Modesto, where they bought a house and settled into married life. Laci worked as a substitute teacher, and Scott continued to run his fertilizer business. In 2002, Laci became pregnant with the couple's first child, a boy they planned to name Conner. Laci was due to give birth in February of 2003. On December 24, 2002, Laci was reported missing by Scott. He told police that he had gone fishing in the San Francisco Bay that day and returned home to find that Laci was gone. The couple's dog, a golden retriever named Mackenzie, was found wandering the neighborhood with its leash still attached. Police immediately launched a search for Laci, but as days turned into weeks, there was no sign of her. As the search for Laci continued, police began to take a closer look at Scott. They learned that he had been having an affair with a woman named Amber Free, and that he had lied to her about being married. When the news of the affair broke, Scott became the subject of intense media scrutiny. On April 18, 2003, 4 months after Laci's disappearance, Scott Peterson was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife and unborn son. The prosecution argued that Scott had killed Laci and dumped her body in the San Francisco Bay, where it was later discovered. The defense maintained Scott's innocence, arguing that there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. The trial of Scott Peterson began on June 1, 2004, and lasted for nearly 6 months. The prosecution presented a mountain of circumstantial evidence against Scott, including his affair with Amber Frey, his suspicious behavior in the days after Laci's disappearance, and his apparent lack of concern for his missing wife. The defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial at best, and that the prosecution had failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. On November 12, 2004, after nearly a week of deliberation, the jury found Scott Peterson guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Laci Peterson and second-degree murder for the death of their unborn son, Conner. The judge sentenced him to death by lethal injection. Scott Peterson is currently on death row at San Quentin State Prison. His case has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and television specials, and continues to fascinate and captivate the public nearly 2 decades later. The murder of Laci Peterson was a tragedy that shook the small town of Modesto and captured the attention of the nation. While justice has been served, the memory of Laci and Conner lives on in the hearts of those who love them. Check out these videos.
You want to talk about the verdict first?
Wow, it was crazy. There was just like this amazing, horrible physical reaction that I had. Everything just went kind of silent, or I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't feel my feet on the floor. I couldn't feel the chair I was sitting in. My vision was even a little blurry. And I just had this weird sensation that I was falling forward and down, and there was going to be no end to this falling forward and down, like there was no floor to land on.
Bring in senior correspondent Laura Ingle, who also covered Peterson's original trial. You covered this from the very beginning. Laura, your thoughts on this day where Scott Peterson will be resentenced in California?
Yeah, it's been incredible. 17 years after we left here in 2005 when he was sentenced to death, back here to see him in the courtroom, and of course with Laci Peterson's family, as well as Claudia mentioned, a very dramatic day. We were expecting to hear Scott Peterson speak. The judge decided that he wasn't going to. One of the things that we did here yesterday is we spoke with a couple of the jurors who were on the original trial about how they feel after all this time, watching this all go down, both the resentencing, the death penalty that they gave him off the table now, and the fact that he could be looking at a new trial. And I asked them, do you still feel that the right person is behind bars? They said yes. When I spoke to juror number 1 about the motive in this, here's what he had to say.
I personally believe that when she got pregnant, that was her death sentence to him. That he didn't want a child.
And as for what the smoking gun was, a lot of people talking about Amber Fry, the woman that Scott Peter was having an affair with. One of the key moments for juror number 4 was listening to the tapes at the trial. And again, we've heard that if there is another trial, Amber Fry is prepared to come back and do it all over again. One of the key moments in the trial, he said, is when he heard Scott Peterson talking to her when he pretended he was in Paris, when really on the New Year's Eve after Laci went missing, he was at a candlelight vigil pretending he was somewhere else. Listen.
And what planet? I mean, detached? That's the word that keeps on coming to my mind. Detached. I mean, dude, it kind of put him in a light that, maybe he just didn't care.
And both jurors said, look, if he does get another trial, they believe if another jury is seated, it will have the same outcome once again. Sandra?
We are marking 15 years since a murder case that captivated the country, the killing of Laci Peterson. Her husband Scott is on death row for the murder of his wife and their unborn son. Here he is back in 2003 before his conviction.
It is entirely too selfish for me to defend myself amongst these accusations when Laci's missing, and all the media time should be spent towards finding her, and all of our energy should be spent towards finding her. Unfortunately, suspicion about me has risen to such a degree that I think people have stopped to look for Laci. They've stopped and lost that, and that's why I'm interested in being in the media now.
That was Scott Peterson, January 30th, 2003. For more on all this, we go to someone who covered this case from the beginning. Laura Ingle is here in New York. Laura, after all these years, what stands out to you the most about covering this case?
Hi, Sandra. Well, one of the things we bring up in the special set to air this Sunday is the question of how Scott Peterson thought he could get away with killing his wife, Laci, and their unborn son on Christmas Eve. We know why he did it, to get out of the life he had and start a new one with a woman he was having an affair with, Amber Fry. We all remember this. The discovery of his affair with Fry was really the turning point in the case after Laci Peterson was reported missing. As a group of experts discusses in the 1 hour special Sunday, where we look at an interview he gave day before his arrest, Scott Peterson never really seemed overly concerned about finding his wife. That was something that stuck out to all of us. But after the bodies of Laci and their unborn son, Conner, washed ashore where he said he was fishing the day she was missing, he was quickly arrested in San Diego under suspicious circumstances.
He had tried to alter his appearance, dyeing his beard. He had cash, he had a weapon, camping paraphernalia, water purifiers, everything that looked like a man on the run.
He had way too much stuff to be just casually going out of town. That was being prepared to be on the run for a while. They catch him, they got him, they're taking him in. He says, I heard that there were bodies, tell me it wasn't them. He knows that it's them. And off he goes, back up to jail in Northern California, coming back to Modesto. And that story captivated the nation when Laci Peterson was first reported missing. Now, 15 years later, we still don't know exactly how she died. Investigators do believe she was killed in her home. Peterson was found guilty of the first-degree murder in her death. She was 8 months pregnant, and the second-degree murder in the death of their unborn son. Sandra?
Laura, Scott Peterson's still on death row. What's the update on his status?
You know, both of Peterson's appellate cases are still pending, meaning they're open. Both challenge his death sentence and request a new trial. He is one of 725 inmates on death row. No prisoner has been executed in California since January of 2006.
Convicted killer Scott Peterson, meanwhile, is set to be resentenced today to life in prison for the murders of his wife, Laci Peterson, and their unborn child. She was 8 months pregnant at the time when prosecutors say Peterson killed her in 2002 on Christmas Eve. Fox Team coverage, legal analyst Mercedes Colwin ahead with reaction. But first to our own Laura Ingle. She has been covering this case from the very beginning. She joins us now live outside of the courthouse there in Redwood City, California. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Sandra. Yeah, this hearing just getting underway. You know, it's been 17 years since Scott Peterson stepped foot inside of this courthouse. That was the day that he was sentenced to death in 2005. At this hour, he has just gone back into the very same courtroom where he was convicted of those crimes, and he will be facing Laci Peterson's family members once again in this courtroom. It's happening now. We're keeping an eye on it. Scott Peterson is expected to speak at today's resentencing. And you remember, he never testified at his double murder trial in 2004 or sentencing in 2005, which brought, of course, international attention to this case. His death sentence was overturned last year after the California Supreme Court ruled that the original trial judge wrongly excluded potential jurors who opposed the death penalty. And on another note, he may also get a new trial next year over juror misconduct. Now, yesterday, we reunited two of the jurors from the trial to get their perspective on these new developments. I asked Mike Bellamaceri, he's juror number 4, if he still stands by his verdicts and what he thought Peterson might have to say today when he speaks.
He's going to play on emotions. Scott is a manipulator. Just look at what he's done. I didn't do it. I loved my wife. This is what happened. No, sorry, Scott, we already know what happened. We went through 5.5 months of a trial.
Peterson's defense team has long contended that a burglary across the street from the Petersons' Modesto home on the day Laci went missing was connected, and say they have proof that someone other than Peterson killed his wife and unborn son. Here's juror number 1, Greg Bertalis.
Remember, this is a man's life, and we can't walk out here, you know, in a year or a week or 10 years from now and say, man, I don't know if he was really guilty. No, in our hearts, he was guilty. In our beliefs, no, there's nobody else that did this, and he committed the crime.
So an emotional day here in court expected. Again, Scott Peterson set to make his very first statement, and Sharon Rocha, Laci Peterson's mother, expected to speak directly to Scott Peterson in court today with another victim impact statement. Back to you.
Court today, 17 years after he was sentenced to death in the murder of his wife and unborn son. So why is he back in court today? Senior correspondent Claudia Cowan live in Redwood City, California. Claudia, good morning.
Good morning to you, Bill. We know Scott Peterson will be sentenced to life without parole, so no mystery there. But there will be drama as Laci Peterson's family endures the pain of facing him in the courtroom once again after all of these years. Last week, Scott Peterson was transferred from death row at San Quentin here to the San Mateo County Jail. Here's a new mugshot of the convicted killer, now 49 years old, but looking pretty much the same. Last year, the California Supreme Court overturned his death sentence after ruling the original trial judge wrongly excluded potential jurors opposed to capital punishment. When Peterson was originally sentenced back in 2005, Laci's heartbroken mother called him an evil murderer who deserved to burn in hell for all eternity. Sharon Rocha may address Scott again today. No cameras allowed in court. We will tell you what happens. But meantime, in another legal twist, there could be a do-over of the whole trial because of alleged juror misconduct. Peterson's lawyer says during jury selection in 2004, one of the women on the jury lied about being the victim of domestic violence, and they say she did that intentionally to get onto the jury to punish Scott Peterson. So in the months ahead, a judge will decide if there was juror misconduct and if Scott Peterson deserves a whole new trial. If that happens, it would be a redo of one of the most sensational murder trials in recent history. But today, Bill, the resentencing and what will almost certainly be some very emotional victim impact statements from Laci's family and friends.
17 years and counting. Thank you, Claudia.
Great news alert now. California judge ruling Scott Peterson will not be granted a new trial. He will spend the rest of his life in prison for the murders of his wife Laci and their unborn son. Claudia Cowan reporting live with the breaking news from California. Claudia?
Hey, John, the judge's ruling now dashing Scott Peterson's hope for a new trial, rejecting his claim that one of the jurors from his original trial back in 2004 was so biased against him that it tainted his conviction for the murder of his pregnant wife, Laci Peterson, and their unborn son, Conner. The judge just issuing her written ruling, a 55-page ruling, moments ago, in which she basically said she found no evidence of any prejudicial juror misconduct. Now, this case revolved around a woman named Rochelle Nice. She was infamous juror number 7 who earned the nickname Strawberry Shortcake because of her bright hair. Peterson's lawyers argued she intentionally lied on her juror questionnaire, which asked if she had ever been a victim of a crime or filed a lawsuit. Well, she answered no, but in fact, she had once taken out a restraining order when she was pregnant. A fact the defense claims shows she had an axe to grind here. Now, in 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned Peterson's death sentence because of mistakes the judge made during jury selection and ordered the lower court to look into these allegations surrounding this juror. During testimony earlier this year, Nice herself defended her answers on that jury form, saying she never considered herself to be a victim. And the judge has now agreed she was not biased, and so his conviction stands. Scott Peterson is now 50 years old. He remains locked up for life without parole. Take a look at his most recent mugshot taken in October when he was moved off death row at San Quentin and to a state prison outside of Sacramento. His defense team says they have other appeals in the work, but for Laci Peterson's family, who in just a few days will be marking their 20th Christmas without her, the judge's ruling this afternoon must come as a huge relief, John. They will not have to relive one of the most sensational murder trials in recent history or sit in a courtroom across from Scott.
Please keep all involved in your prayers. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments below. And be nice, or a frog you will become. Damn it. If you like the video, like, subscribe, and hit that bell to receive notifications of when we upload a new video. Also check out our merch at sen1he.com.